Welcome at a boring history for sleep. Like, comments, and subscribe.
Imagine a world where your heart rate slows, where the only sound is the rhythmic, heavy thud of dark pine trees swaying in an alpine gale, and the distant, almost hypnotic clank of a copper bell hanging from the neck of a cow standing in a sea of fog. For centuries, Europe was a butcher's block, a continent soaked in iron, blood, and screaming monarchs. While empires rose, bled, and rotted into the mud, one tiny, impossible piece of geography looked at the chaos, drew a thick black line around itself, and whispered, "Number." They built their homes on sheer vertical cliffs of gray granite. They carved tunnels through mountains that men said God put there to keep people apart. They locked the doors, buried the keys, and decided that while the rest of the world burned itself to cinders, they would sit in the dark, count gold, and make very, very precise clocks. Tonight, we are going to Switzerland. Not the Switzerland of colorful travel brochures, smiling milkmaids, and overpriced chocolate. We are going to the hidden, cold, fiercely strange history of a nation born out of stubbornness, sustained by secrecy, and forged in the blood of men who realized that the most dangerous weapon in human history isn't a sword. It's silence. Close your eyes. Let the outside world fade away. Let the noise of your day dissolve into the damp, deep mountain air. Let's begin. The men who fell from the sky. To understand Switzerland, you have to understand the mountains. And to understand the mountains, you have to realize that for most of human history, they weren't a romantic landscape to be painted. They were an existential terror. Before the roads, before the funiculars, before the luxury ski resorts, the Swiss Alps were viewed by the rest of Europe as the literal playground of demons, dragons, and the damned. Medieval cartographers drew pictures of scaly monsters breathing fire across alpine passes. Travelers crossing the St. Gothard Pass didn't pack hiking boots. They blindfolded their mules, stuffed beeswax into their ears so they wouldn't hear the wailing of mountain spirits, and prayed to survive. If you fell into a crevasse, you didn't just die, you vanished into an ancient, blue ice tomb that might spit your preserved bones back out 100 years later. And yet, people lived there. Not because they wanted to, but because the valleys were the only places the rest of the world couldn't easily reach. Around the 13th century, a loose collection of isolated mountain communities living in the central valleys, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, faced a slow-motion strangulation. Surrounding them were powerful feudal lords, greedy dukes, and, most aggressively, the Habsburg dynasty. The Habsburgs looked down from their opulent Austrian castles at these ragged, mud-caked mountaineers and thought what every empire thinks when it sees a small, independent people: you belong to me. The traditional story of Switzerland's birth is a myth wrapped in folklore, but like all good myths, it holds a psychological truth. It's the story of William Tell, forced to shoot an apple off his son's head by a tyrannical Austrian bailiff named Gessler. Whether Tell existed or not doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling of that story. It's the ultimate expression of the mountain psyche: leave us alone. In 1291, on a high, windy meadow above a dark lake called the Rutli, representatives from those three tiny cantons met under the cover of night. They didn't sign a grand constitution or declare a glorious empire. They swore a simple, grim oath of mutual defense. If anyone attacked one of them, the others would crawl out of the mist and kill them. They weren't trying to conquer Europe. They were forming a suicide pact for survival. The most feared killers in Christendom. Here is the great historical irony of Switzerland. The country famous today for being the ultimate symbol of neutrality, peace, and chocolate spent the late Middle Ages producing the most terrifying, ruthless, and efficient mercenaries the world had ever seen. If you were a king in the 14th, 15th, or 16th century, whether you were the King of France, the Pope in Rome, or the Holy Roman Emperor, and you needed an army that wouldn't run away, wouldn't mutiny, and would happily slaughter men twice their size for a sack of gold, you didn't hire your own citizens. You hired the Swiss. Why? Because the Swiss had invented a military tactic that completely broke medieval warfare. While knights in shining armor were busy riding heavy horses into the mud and hacking at each other with broadswords, the Swiss peasants looked at their long pine forests and said, "Let's make giant sticks." They developed the pike square. Hundreds of men standing shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable forest of 18-foot-long ash wood poles tipped with razor-sharp steel spikes. A cavalry charge against a Swiss pike square was like running a horse at a meat grinder. Then came the halberd, a horrific hybrid of an axe, a spear, and a hook, specifically designed to reach inside the armor of a noble knight and peel him open like a tin can. In battles like Morgarten and Sempach, these ragged mountain farmers utterly humiliated the aristocratic cavalry of Europe. They didn't fight for chivalry. They didn't fight for God or king. They fought because they were desperately poor, their land could barely grow turnips, and the only export they had that the rest of Europe wanted was death. By the 1500s, Swiss mercenaries were everywhere. The Pope's personal bodyguard, the Swiss Guard, who still wear those eccentric, multicolored Renaissance uniforms designed by Michelangelo today, was established in 1506. They weren't there for pageantry, they were there because they were the only soldiers the Pope could trust not to poison him. The psychological toll on the Swiss homeland was profound. Entire generations of young men left the valleys, marched down into the sunny, bloody plains of Italy or France, and never came back. Those who did return brought back foreign gold, strange diseases, and a deep, collective trauma. Eventually, the Swiss looked around at the piles of blood money and the thinning ranks of their youth, and they made a quiet, collective decision that would define their modern identity: we are done. They pulled back into their mountains. They closed the borders of their foreign adventures, and they turned their lethal focus inward. If the world wanted to kill itself, it would have to do it without Swiss hands. The architecture of isolation, as the rest of Europe industrialized in the 18th and 19th centuries, building massive, smoky factories, churning out coal dust, and erupting into bloody revolutions, Switzerland stayed weirdly, stubbornly medieval. While London and Paris were roaring with the noise of steam engines and urban expansion, the Swiss economy was still largely based on cows, cheese, and vertical farming. If you walked through a Swiss village in 1800, your senses would be filled with very specific, rhythmic textures. The deep, resonant creak of heavy timber chalets built with interlocking beams designed to withstand decades of heavy snow loads. The smell of wood smoke mixing with the rich, pungent aroma of alpine cheese curing in dark cellars. The sound of running water, everywhere, water was running. Glacial streams diverted through hollowed-out pine logs to feed public troughs, turning watermills, and keeping the air perpetually crisp and damp. The geography itself enforced a strange kind of psychological insulation. Consider the cantons, the individual states that make up Switzerland. They were so fiercely independent that for centuries, they barely spoke to each other, let alone trusted each other. Some spoke a harsh, guttural Alemannic German. Others spoke a melodious French. A few spoke Italian, and a tiny, isolated pocket spoke Romansh, a dying Latin-based tongue whispered in high mountain valleys where the sun didn't hit for 3 months out of the year. They had no natural unity. They had no common language. No dominant religion, Protestant and Catholic cantons spent centuries glaring at each other across river banks, and no shared culture, except for one thing: the absolute, unshakable terror of being ruled by outsiders. To survive together without tearing each other apart, they invented a system of radical decentralization. Instead of a king in a glittering capital giving orders down the chain, power was pushed down to the most local level possible. Decisions were made in town squares, by men raising their hands in the open air at Landsgemeinde. It was slow, it was tedious, it was deeply boring to anyone looking for the high drama of royal courts. But it worked. It created a society where everyone had a veto, which meant nobody could ever become a tyrant. The art of the watch and the silence of the vault. By the 19th century, Switzerland faced a quiet crisis. They had stopped exporting mercenaries. Their soil was too rocky to feed a growing population. They had no coal, no iron, no coastline, and no colonies. By all the rules of the modern industrial world, Switzerland should have collapsed into rural poverty. Instead, they turned their greatest weakness, their complete isolation, into an absolute economic superpower. Since nobody could invade them without losing thousands of men in the snow, and since they refused to take sides in Europe's endless wars, Switzerland became the neutral living room of the continent. If two empires hated each other so much they couldn't be in the same room, they met in Geneva. If international human rights needed a safe space to be written without a bomb dropping on the building, they built it in Bern. And then, there was the craft. If you are stuck inside a wooden chalet for 6 months of the year while blinding snow blankets your windows and the wind howls down the chimney, what do? You tinker. In the mountain valleys of the Jura region, farmers turned the long, dark winter nights into a masterclass in microscopic precision. They didn't have heavy industry, so they built things that required no raw materials other than brass, steel, and infinite patience. They built watches, not just any watches, machines of unimaginable complexity, gears the size of a pinhead, springs thinner than a human hair, tourbillons designed to counteract the pull of gravity on a balance wheel. The creation of a Swiss watch required a mindset that the rest of the modern world was rapidly losing: absolute, uncompromising patience. You could not rush a Swiss watchmaker. If you rushed, the gears slipped, the steel warped, and you had to start over from total darkness. This obsession with precision bled into everything else they did. If you build a bridge in Switzerland, you don't build it to last 20 years, you build it to last 500. If you lay down a train track, it doesn't just arrive around noon, it arrives at 12 hours 4 minutes and 0 seconds, and if it doesn't, the entire country experiences a quiet, collective psychological disturbance. And with that precision came something else: discretion. As Europe grew wealthy, wealthy men and corrupt kings needed a place to hide their fortunes away from prying eyes, seizing tax collectors, and revolutionary mobs. Where better than a country guarded by mountains, run by accountants, and bound by a cultural obsession with keeping secrets? The Swiss banking system was born not out of luxury, but out of the same impulse that built the stone chalets: a deep, profound distrust of the outside world. In 1934, Switzerland codified bank secrecy into federal law. Breaking a client's confidentiality wasn't just bad manners, it became a serious criminal offense. The vaults went deep into the granite. Below the lakes, below the pine forests, miles of steel doors clicked shut. And inside, stacked neatly on wooden pallets, sat the gold of empires, dictators, and quiet billionaires who wanted nothing more than to disappear into the alpine fog. The fortress under the mountain. As the 20th century tore itself apart in two world wars, Switzerland performed the ultimate balancing act of survival. While the map of Europe was being shredded and redrawn in fire, Switzerland sat in the exact center of the conflagration like an unmelting block of glacier ice. How did they do it? Partly through trade. They sold ball bearings to the Allies and traded currency with the Axis. They were pragmatic to the point of coldness. But underneath the diplomatic tightrope lay a physical reality that every general in World War II understood. Invading Switzerland was simply not worth the blood. The Swiss didn't just rely on a piece of paper declaring neutrality. They turned their entire country into a porcupine. Every male citizen was, and still is, part of the militia. Every home had a rifle in the closet. But more than that, the Swiss military engineered one of the most astonishing defense systems in human history, the National Redoubt. Deep inside the Alps, military engineers hollowed out entire mountains. They built secret underground Air Force bases inside granite peaks, where fighter jets were parked in underground hangars and rolled out directly onto runways cut into cliff faces. They installed hospitals, fuel depots, bakeries, and barracks deep beneath the rock, capable of housing hundreds of thousands of soldiers for months without seeing the sun. Every major bridge, tunnel, and highway pass was rigged with explosives. The detonators weren't kept in some distant military base. They were wired directly into the local post offices and police stations, ready to be flipped at a moment's notice. If an invading army crossed the border, the Swiss didn't plan to stop them on the plains. They planned to blow their own bridges, dynamite their own tunnels, retreat into the core of the mountains, and let the outside world choke on the granite dust. They made themselves an indigestible stone in the throat of Europe. The descent into silence. Take a deep breath. Feel the cool, heavy air of the high altitude filling your chest. Imagine walking out onto your wooden balcony tonight. The valley below is completely dark, save for the faint, yellow glow of a single street lamp cutting through a thick layer of rolling mist. The peaks tower above you, massive, ancient, indifferent shadows blotting out the stars. Switzerland isn't just a country. It's an idea. It's the radical, comforting thought that you don't need to conquer the world to survive it. Sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is step back, lock the heavy oak door, listen to the ticking of a tiny gear in the dark, and let the noise of history pass you by. You are safe here in the mountains. The storm is howling outside the valley, but the stone is thick, the vaults are locked, and the clock is ticking, second by second, into the quiet night. Tonight, we descend. We are moving past the chalets, past the banking vaults, and into the strange, quiet belly of the country. We are going to explore the traditions that the Swiss keep hidden in the dark, the festivals that look like nightmares, the subterranean worlds that hum with hidden energy, and the peculiar, almost eerie obsession with cleanliness, order, and silence that permeates every crevice of this land. Have you ever wondered what happens when a country decides that it doesn't want to change? What happens when a culture treats time not as a rushing river, but as a circular gear, turning back on itself every single year? The mountains are waiting. The fog is rising from the lake. The world you left behind is 1,000 miles away, and it no longer matters. Close your eyes. Let's descend into the silence. The night of the cloaked ghosts. In most of the world, holidays are about light, noise, and celebration. In the deep valleys of the Swiss Alps, some of the oldest traditions are about something much older, something darker. Consider the Klausjagen in Kusnacht. It's not a Christmas pageant. It's an exercise in sensory overload designed to drive out the shadows of winter. On the night of December 5th, Thousands of men emerge from the darkness wearing massive, intricate, backlit cardboard mitres, towers of glowing paper and light that rise 5 feet above their heads, flickering like cathedral windows walking through the mud. They are followed by hundreds of people dragging heavy, iron cowbells that weigh more than a human child. When the signal is given, the silence of the alpine night is shattered by a sound so rhythmic, so metallic, and so intense that it vibrates in your very teeth. It's the sound of the earth trying to shake off the winter. It's terrifying, it's beautiful, and it's completely alien to the modern world. And then there are the Perchten. In the more isolated mountain villages, the locals don't dress as Santa Claus. They dress as beasts. They carve masks out of Swiss pine, attach the horns of mountain goats and the pelts of wolves, and roam the streets at night, hunting for the bad spirits of the past year. It's a reminder that beneath the refined, polite, clock-watching veneer of modern Switzerland, there is a pulse that beats in time with the seasons. It's a culture that remembers when the mountains were full of demons, and they haven't quite forgotten how to keep them at bay. The subterranean world. If you ever find yourself hiking in the Bernese Oberland, look closely at the hillsides. You might see a steel door, painted to match the gray rock, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Switzerland is a country with a hollow interior. During the Cold War, the Swiss didn't just build bunkers, they built an entire subterranean infrastructure. By law, every citizen is guaranteed a place in a nuclear fallout shelter. That's not just a policy, it's an architectural reality. There are tunnels underneath the cities that connect hospitals, police stations, and government buildings. There are massive, climate-controlled caverns used to store the nation's strategic reserves: grain, oil, medicine, and sugar. These aren't just damp basements, they are high-tech, reinforced cathedrals of logistics, buried deep in the limestone. Think about the psychology of that. Every child growing up in a Swiss apartment building knows that one floor down, behind a massive, airtight steel door, lies the place where their family will survive the end of the world. It creates a strange, subconscious sense of security, a feeling that no matter how chaotic the surface world becomes, there is a bedrock of order, preparation, and stability waiting underneath. It is the Swiss way of saying, "We will not be caught off guard." The cult of the clock. You cannot talk about Switzerland without talking about the obsession with time. In most cultures, a clock is a tool to tell you when to go to work. In Switzerland, time is a moral imperative. To be late is not just a nuisance, it is an insult to the community. Why? Because for centuries, the Swiss economy relied on thousands of independent workshops, thousands of people working in total isolation in their own homes, all contributing to a single finished product. If one watchmaker is late with his gear, the chain breaks. The entire system fails. This created a society that breathes in unison. The trains run with a precision that borders on the religious. If you want to see the most impressive clock in Switzerland, don't look at a Patek Philippe, go to the Zurich main train station at 12 p.m. Thousands of people moving in perfect, fluid lines, trains arriving at the exact millisecond, an entire population synchronized by a shared, invisible metronome. It is hypnotic to watch. There is no friction. There is no chaos. It is a masterpiece of human coordination. But it comes at a price, the pressure to be perfect. The Swiss have one of the highest rates of orderliness in the world, and it can feel, to an outsider, like a quiet, velvet-lined cage. Everything is labeled. Everything has a place. Everything has a bin. There is no mess allowed, because mess is a sign of a breakdown in the system. Even the cows, the iconic Swiss cows, are treated with a level of care that borders on the clinical. They are groomed, their bells are tuned to specific musical keys, and they are brought down from the high pastures in a grand, solemn procession called the Dazel. It is the most beautiful, orderly parade you will ever see. Everything in Switzerland is managed, groomed, and polished. Even the wilderness is a managed wilderness. The silence of the lake. As we reach the final part of our journey, let's go to the water. Switzerland is home to hundreds of lakes, deep, glacial, sapphire blue voids carved out by the Ice Age. Lake Geneva, Lake Lucerne, Lake Thun. They are so deep that they hold secrets from thousands of years ago. On a moonless night, when the wind dies down, the surface of these lakes becomes a perfect, obsidian mirror. If you stand on the shore of Lake Lucerne, you can see the lights of the distant villages reflected in the water, looking like fallen stars trapped in the dark. The silence here is different. It's not the silence of a library. It's the silence of depth. It is said that the Swiss don't feel comfortable unless they have a mountain in front of them and a lake behind them. It provides a sense of enclosure, a natural boundary that separates their private world from the loud, messy expanse of the rest of Europe. There is a peace in that isolation, a peace in the knowledge that you are surrounded by walls of stone and basins of deep, cold water. It's a feeling of being in a high-altitude fortress, a place where the world's problems seem to float away on the mist. The last reflection. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, I want you to hold on to this image. A lone chalet, high on a ridge, glowing with a soft, warm, amber light against a backdrop of deep, indigo mountains. Inside, a clock is ticking, a steady, rhythmic, reassuring sound that measures out the seconds with absolute precision. The fire is burning low. The snow is falling in soft, silent feathers outside the window, blanketing the world in a thick, sound-dampening coat of white. There are no wars here. There are no shouting matches. There are only the mountains, the stone, the clock, and the deep, dark, restful silence. Switzerland is a reminder that you don't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the strongest. You don't need to be the fastest to be the most enduring. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is hold your ground. Keep your secrets, and live your life one steady, beautiful second at a time. You are safe. You are in the mountains. The world is far away, the air is cold and crisp, and the night is long and quiet. Let the ticking of the clock slow your heart rate. Let the weight of the mountains press you gently into your bed. Let the silence of the valley pull you down, deeper and deeper, into the dark, peaceful center of the earth. Sleep now. The mountain is watching over you. The gears are turning. The silence is complete. Good night.
Disclaimer: while the historical accounts detailed here are grounded in rigorous research, we have integrated AI generated imagery to provide a vivid window into the past. Please note that these visuals are intended as creative interpretation rather than precise historical documentation. Our primary objective is to offer an engaging, immersive educational journey through history.